Your mom passed away. Oh, I see. I'm off on an overseas trip now. That's what my husband, who's been working away from home, blurted out on the phone after I had informed him of my mother's sudden passing. Not only was he not returning home, he was going on a trip abroad. I was in disbelief, but an even more unbelievable event occurred 3 days later. His parents passed away too, and I still couldn't get in touch with him. The reality of not being able to attend his parents' funeral due to his actions would turn his world into a living nightmare once he found out. My name is Nancy. I'm a 54-year-old homemaker. Our 20-year-old son recently moved out and started living alone, so it's just me and my husband Thomas at home now. Our relationship began through an introduction from my late father. My father had a close friend from his youth, and the two of them wanted us, their children, to get married since we were at an appropriate age and both working at the same company. This felt like an arranged date of sorts. We found that we had a lot in common, like loving the same music and enjoying traveling, so we hit it off right away. With the encouragement from our parents, we decided to get married quickly. We were blessed with a child and had a smooth married life. However, when our child was 10 years old, my father passed away due to illness. Apart from that, we were living in peace without any significant events. However, there was one thing about parenting that I couldn't agree with. I am a homemaker, and our living is made possible thanks to my husband's salary. Of course I appreciate that, but my husband would always claim he's too busy with work overtime till late at night, and usually return home just before the last train. Actually, it would be better if he came home with the last train. There were too many days where he simply sent a curt text saying, "I'll stay at the company tonight," and didn't come home. The meals I carefully prepared were often wasted. I wish he'd notified me earlier if he wasn't coming home, and I wondered if he really was that busy. My husband works at the same company as my father did, but my father, despite traveling a lot for work, seldom came home just before the last train or stayed overnight at the company. Given the cost of the mortgage, child rearing, and daily expenses, I couldn't loudly complain as all the money was earned by my husband. However, just because he worked didn't mean he didn't have to do anything around the house or look after our child. My dissatisfaction gradually built up towards my husband, who always prioritized hanging out with his friends on his days off. The only time our son saw his father was when he woke up and saw him sleeping next to him in the morning. When our son started speaking, I learned that he didn't think of his father as a parent, but as an unfamiliar man who's always sleeping at home. I felt overwhelmed, as it was almost as if I was raising our child alone. I had mentioned this to my father before, but he didn't listen, saying, "Thomas is doing his best at our company. Don't speak ill of your own husband. A wife should always support her husband." My father was a firm believer in traditional gender roles. The usual routine was my mother listening to my complaints and saying, "He doesn't know a woman's hardships," with a smile after my father had drunk himself unconscious. After my father's passing, my mother's vitality also started to fade to such an extent that I couldn't afford to complain about my husband. My mother used to complain about my father to me, but at the end of the day, she loved him. I wanted to build a family like my parents, but even though we seemed like a similar traditional household, our family was different. To put it bluntly, I think we lacked mutual respect for each other. Before I knew it, I had spent 10 years living the same way, and even after our son became an adult and moved out, our daily life didn't change significantly. One day, I softly voiced a complaint to my husband, who rarely paid any attention to the house. "Listen, dear, now that our son is an adult and moved out, I don't think you need to work so much overtime. I wish you could come home earlier and spend some time at home. We could do housework together, have meals together." I only wanted him to spend more time at home, but he took offense at the part about doing housework, and he was furious. "What do you think I'm working so hard for every day? And you don't even work. You expect me to whip my tired body into shape after work to do housework?" With that, he yelled and slammed the front door as he stormed out of the house. The sound of the door slamming loudly reflected the depth of his anger. At this rate, he probably won't come home for about 3 days. Even though my heart was deeply hurt, my mind was oddly calm to be thinking this. Why can't things go smoothly? All I want is to live in harmony with my husband. Did I say things wrong? Could there have been a better way to handle this without upsetting him? My mother, even in the same situation, seemed to have managed it better. What's different between my mother and me? As I pondered this, before I knew it, tears were trickling down my face. My husband returned home 4 days later. I'm sorry. I apologized to my returned husband. I wonder what I'm apologizing for. I don't think I did anything wrong, but still, I always apologized and he forgave me. This was our usual reconciliation pattern. "Yeah, whatever." Although he said that, our relationship as a couple clearly deteriorated after that. No, probably just that I wasn't satisfied. Up until now, I was always assuming I was at fault and would act submissive, but this time I couldn't feel that way. I found that I couldn't respect my husband anymore. One day, about a month later, while things remained awkward between us, he said, "I've been transferred to Alaska. I'll be moving alone." My husband, who hadn't been talking much lately, suddenly opened up with this news. Alaska? It's so far away. It feels as if the distance between our hearts is about the same. Alright, understood. Please take care. That's about all I could say. He packed his bags and went off to Alaska in no time. I was left alone in this big house. It seems like a lie that just a while ago we were a family of 3 living here. We've been married for about 30 years. Up until now, I managed to keep going for a child, but that child is no longer with us. Recently, it seems that divorces later in life aren't so rare. I wonder if we'll become one of those cases. Just as I was contemplating this, my smartphone rang. The caller was from my mother. I thought I could use some advice on this matter. Just perfect, I picked up the smartphone.
Hello, I'm Dr. Johnson from Chicago General Hospital. Am I speaking with the daughter of the owner of the cell phone?
Hospital? A sinking feeling of dread washed over me. Yes, I'm her daughter. Is there something wrong with my mom at the hospital?
Please remain calm. Your mother passed away a little while ago due to acute heart failure. We would like you to come to the hospital as soon as possible.
Everything turned black before my eyes. My mom is gone? Can it be some mistake? Just last week when we spoke on the phone, she was fine.
Hello? Are you still there? Hello?
I'm sorry, I'm just in shock and confused.
That's understandable. My condolences for your loss.
Anyway, I'll be there as soon as possible. Please tell me the address. I hurried to the hospital. At the reception desk, I gave my name and was guided to the room. Upon confirming the body, there was no mistake. It was indeed my mother. Seeing it for myself, the reality sank in. Until I reached the hospital, a part of me was hoping that perhaps my mother had simply dropped her phone and someone who happened to have a heart attack picked it up. It's so sudden. I hadn't even repaid her for raising me yet. Could you please leave us alone for a while? When I said that, the nurse was considerate enough to leave the room. And then I broke down and cried. After a while, when I managed to calm myself, I started to prepare for the funeral. Let's see, first I need to contact the relatives and make arrangements, and I should also let Thomas know. I took out my cell phone and called my husband, Thomas. He answered the phone in a sullen tone, and when I explained the situation, he just said, "I see." Not just I see, I'm holding the funeral soon. I want you to come here. But he told me he was about to go on an overseas trip with his colleagues. A trip? I unintentionally responded in a sharp tone, but he just replied that he was always working and there was nothing wrong with going on a vacation on his day off. I didn't push it any further, thinking that it would only result in him saying, "Who do you think puts food on the table?" So I contacted our son and held the funeral together. Our son must have noticed that I wasn't doing well, so he said he would stay with me for a while, taking a leave from college. As soon as the funeral was over and I thought I could breathe a sigh of relief, I received a call from my husband's brother. Apparently, my in-laws had passed away in a car accident. With successive family tragedies happening, I still couldn't get a hold of my husband. It seems that modern smartphones can be used normally overseas, but I could not contact my husband. According to my son, depending on the country or the settings on the phone, it might not be possible to make contact from here. So I decided to send him an email. When he comes back from his trip, he'll surely contact me. A week passed, but still no contact. When my son checked with his office just in case, they said he was still on paid leave but was due back in 3 days. What country is he in? Hasn't he seen his email? What is he doing about his own parents? On a hunch that my husband might have taken up with his mistress, I hired a private investigator. I found out the results in just 3 days. As I suspected, he was having an affair. My husband took a woman he met on a trip to Japan as it was and let her go sightseeing. I received several photos of him happily strolling around the city with this foreign woman. It seems he's having a pretty good time in his new work assignment in Alaska. I wondered what I had been being considerate of. Was it concern for my husband who was working hard for the family? In reality, he's just a fucking bastard who goes abroad to play and has an affair. This might not be the first time. I was filled with rage, perhaps partly due to all the patience I had been practicing till now. I called my husband's office and told the receptionist I had an urgent matter that needed to be connected to him.
Hello, what's the matter? I told you not to call me at work unless it's important.
Didn't you check your email? Our parents are dead.
You mean your mom, right? You told me about it before. Are you still upset about that? I finally got some time off. Can't be helped.
No, I mean your parents. They died in a car accident.
What? Are you kidding?
Why would I lie about something like this? You said you just came back from abroad, but I heard you've been back for several days. Why haven't you been checking your emails from me? My husband seemed lost for words, seemingly unable to accept the reality that was suddenly thrust upon him. Hello? Are you listening?
Yeah.
His voice was trembling. While he had no qualms about skipping my mother's funeral, he seems to be shaken by the death of his own parents. But the funeral's over and their bodies have already been cremated. It's too late for regrets. I didn't feel any sympathy and I said coldly, "You better get back here as soon as possible." I thought I heard his hoarse reply, but I hung up without acknowledging it. Mom, what happened? He's coming home now, and just so you know, I'm divorcing your father today. What? Why all of a sudden? I get that you're mad he's not contactable during his busy time, but isn't divorce too extreme? I explained everything to my son. It was a harsh reality to lay on our child, but he's an adult now. I thought it would be better to explain everything clearly rather than make up some weak excuse. This can't be defended. I'll stay by you, Mom. With my son's support assured, everything was ready. Then my husband came home.
I'm home.
His tone was the usual arrogant tone, but his voice was noticeably lacking in vigor. He might be just a pitiful man who lost both parents at once and couldn't even attend their funerals, but I've got something to say. Your brother was pretty steamed, you know.
It can't be helped. Even after returning to Japan, I was busy entertaining clients.
Quite a young client, isn't she? Saying that, I showed him the picture I'd gotten from the private investigator.
What? Where'd you get this?
Look at you, arm in arm and having a good time. If this is really a client, did you pick up some new tricks? It seems like this isn't your first time. Sounds like you've got women everywhere. I dropped the bombshell. The effect was immediate.
So I was busted.
My husband confessed without hesitation. Must have figured there was no point trying to cover it up. I continued to pile it on. Not only not seeing my parents, but not even attempting to visit your own parents in their last moments?
Shut up. You have no idea how much stress I'm under at work. I'm working my ass off to support this family. Yes, even you who never lifts a finger, you're not faultless.
My husband showed no shame, instead going on the offensive.
You're the worst. I'm ashamed to call such a man my father.
Let's be done with this. Let's get a divorce. I'll be filing for alimony later. I'll send your personal belongings from this house by FedEx.
I'll be relieved to be free from a leech like you. I'll pay the standard alimony, but don't expect any more than that.
I thought I'd been doing everything for my husband, but was he thinking of me as a parasite? What had I been putting up with all this time? Taking into account the money spent on his numerous affairs, I decided to claim $45,000 in alimony. Whether he could afford it or not, he paid it in one lump sum. Since I used to report the money I spent and my husband would pay me back, I had no idea how much he had. However, due to the fact that he had been finding mistresses abroad, bringing them back to Japan and partying around, and couldn't even attend his own parents' funerals, word spread throughout the company, forcing him to resign. He was in a decent position at the company, so he probably thought highly of himself. In reality, he got into the company through his parents' connections, and my husband, who didn't have any special skills, ended up having to settle for part-time work when he couldn't find another job. According to my brother-in-law, losing his family and job all at once, and now having lost his parents as well, and not even being able to say goodbye to them, seemed to be driving my husband to the edge. He can't sleep unless he takes sleeping pills and is reportedly seeing a psychiatrist. I didn't feel any sympathy at all. My son, who had said he'd stay with me for a while, returned to our family home, worried about my physical and mental exhaustion from the divorce turmoil. I think I'll live modestly with my son. Thinking about the future, I should have saved the alimony, but I really wanted a change of pace, so I decided to go on my first overseas trip with my son. After that, I think I'll start working part-time. The more I think about challenging something new, the more excited I get. My life is just beginning. My name is Jennifer. I'm a dedicated housewife who's been married for 20 years. I remarried with my current husband 20 years ago. I was in my first marriage while it was his second, and during our relationship he confessed that he had a son who is turning 5. I tried to leave several times after that, but in the end I couldn't part from him and we went ahead and tied the knot. Despite all the struggles, ever since we got married, I have made a point of raising his child as if he were my own. The son was 5 years old when we got married. He did show typical adolescent rebellious behavior, but we never had dramatic exchanges like in the movies where he would yell, "You're not my real mom," or anything of the sort. I believe we built a happy family together. 2 years into our marriage, I became pregnant. We were blessed with a lovely baby boy of our own. Our eldest son, James, was a bit older than his younger brother with a 7-year age gap, but he was still very kind and protective as an older brother. Even though I wasn't his biological mother, I was somewhat apprehensive, but as the old saying goes, better to have the baby than to worry about it. Life has a way of working itself out, as I've come to realize. A few years after, our second son was born. Our eldest son started to enter puberty and began to reject my presence. The trigger was something truly trivial. I wasn't aware of it myself, but our eldest son told me that I treated him and his younger brother differently. I tried to explain to him that wasn't the case, but he wouldn't listen. Our relationship began to break down like a landslide from that point, and now in his eyes, I am just someone who does the chores around the house. Regardless of whether my son recognizes me as his mother or not, I have been determined to be his mother ever since the day I married my husband. Until the day he becomes an adult and leaves this house, I'm committed to take care of him no matter how much he resents it. I decided to commit to this wholeheartedly. As a result, our relationship worsened as he went through puberty and his rebellious stage. Looking back, I probably should have let things slide and not made any comments, but I just couldn't do that at the time. Now, it's become commonplace for him to call me, "Hey you." When I was doing the laundry or cleaning, he would yell at me furiously, "Don't touch my stuff when I didn't ask you to." He did apologize later, probably realizing how out of line he was, but when I forgave him with a smile, he became defiant again, saying, "In the first place, it's your fault for doing things I told you to stop, lady." I knew then that things were getting out of hand. My husband does try to discipline him, but he's well behaved in front of my husband, so my husband ended up doubting me, saying, "Did James really do that?" I tried recording our interactions to prove it to my husband a few times, but it never worked out, as something always came up or we didn't have any arguments when I was recording. As time went on, our eldest son came of age and decided to leave home. I remember breathing a sigh of relief, thinking that I'd finally made it through. His parting words when leaving the house were, "Finally, I don't have to see strangers' faces." I thought those were harsh words for me, who had been taking care of him every day for 15 years since we first met. He's not a bad kid. Even though I understood this intellectually, my heart couldn't catch up. When our eldest son left the house saying those words, our second son, Richard, who was just entering middle school at the time, looked perplexed and asked, "Why does Big Brother hate Mom so much?" So I thought it necessary to tell my younger son the whole truth as well, and told him about remarrying his father and that his older brother was his father's son from a previous marriage. My younger son seemed shocked at first that his older brother and him were not blood related, but he quietly listened to the end of the story. In the end, he seemed to accept it, saying, "So that's why his attitude towards Mom was weird these past few years." I don't regret marrying our husband, but I began to regret claiming to be the mother of our older son. Maybe there was a way to live together as just housemates? Maybe I didn't have to force him to recognize me as his mother? Once I started thinking about it, the thoughts just didn't stop. A few years after our eldest son moved out, we received a message from him saying, "I will be visiting soon for a marriage introduction." The message was relayed through his younger brother. I hadn't received any direct communication, but I was okay with it because I was getting regular updates about him through my husband and younger son. However, with his marriage on the horizon, we had to do the formal introductions and face each other. After meeting with the parents of the bride-to-be, they left. The room felt awkward because we hadn't seen each other for several years, but the conversation moved to whether or not I would attend the wedding. "I don't think of you as my mother. I don't want you to attend the ceremony." "What? What are you saying? Jennifer's the one who raised you up to this point." "I don't care. I didn't ask for that. Anyway, you remarried without even asking my opinion, and you're trying to tell me she's my mother? I can't accept that." "James, have you been saying such terrible things to Mom all this time? I trusted you." "I've been pretending all along in front of you. I'm severing my ties with this house. I'm being adopted into my wife's family, so I don't need to grovel to you guys anymore." "Have you really never thought of me as your mother, not even once?" I don't know about when I was a little kid, but certainly not in my memory." "I see. I understand." With my husband, who was looking worried behind me, I left the room. I didn't want to cry in front of my eldest son, but when I left the room, I couldn't cry. What had the past 15 years been for? I remembered my eldest son when he was little, when he used to call me Mom and say, "I love you," with a smile. My phone wallpaper was a picture of my eldest son and my younger son when they were small. A picture of my 7-year-old eldest son holding my newborn younger son timidly. If I could go back to that time, I would want to, I thought as I looked at the picture. Those were good times, really. I muttered and decided to leave the house. My younger son is 18, graduating from high school next year, and has mentioned going to a university with dormitories. In effect, I will be relieved of my duties. So I've decided to change my mindset and start enjoying living on my own from now on. That night, I had a talk with my husband about our future, about our eldest son today.
Jennifer, I'm truly sorry I never believed you. I had no idea that our son James could disrespect others in such a way.
No, it's alright now. Perhaps my parenting was also at fault. Even though I thought of him as my own child, I suppose I treated him differently. He told me so himself. I wasn't aware of it myself, but I was taking care of him in my own way.
I know that better than anyone else. You have always taken care of James as if he were your own. I am truly grateful for that.
But it seems that even that was something he didn't want. It's almost laughable, isn't it? As I made this self-deprecating remark, my husband made a pained face, took my hand, and apologized to me over and over again. Then, I told my husband that I would not attend the ceremony as he wished, and that I wanted a divorce because I would be leaving the house as soon as our second son left. I handed him the divorce papers.
Are you serious?
Of course, I would never joke about something like this.
You're right, you are that kind of person. I'm truly sorry for all the pain I've caused you.
You don't need to apologize anymore. I have never regretted marrying you, so, okay?
Jennifer, I love you from the bottom of my heart.
I love you too. Please take care of James and Richard for me. That night, I fell asleep in my husband's arms for the first time since we were newlyweds. I was able to sleep soundly for the first time in a long while, comforted by the faint sound of his heartbeat. Several days passed since our discussion about the divorce. Our second son graduated from high school, and our eldest son's wedding is coming up next week. Our second son was wondering if he should wear his school uniform to attend the wedding, which I found amusing. Noticing me smiling at his preparations for the ceremony, he approached me and started a conversation.
Mom, are you really not going to attend my brother's wedding?
Yes, he said he didn't want me there, so there's nothing I can do about it. It's his big day. I want him to enjoy it.
But Mom, you're the one who raised him with care.
It's okay, Richard. There's no need for you to worry about it. Not convinced by my words, my second son kept groaning in frustration. It must have been frustrating for him. He knows the good relationship I used to have with our eldest son. But repairing the relationship is now impossible. I have prepared to leave the house and the divorce is settled. I didn't ask for any division of the property, kept the money I had, and left the house with our second son. The house that was filled with memories of many years spent there. A house that represents half of my life. I left a video message for my second son and left my family behind. A week after I left home, I heard from my younger son that my eldest son's wedding went off without a hitch. I was relieved and asked my younger son about his impressions of the ceremony. Then he replied,
"It was a total disaster, seriously."
As I had chosen not to attend the wedding in accordance with my eldest son's wishes, his response took me by surprise, stopping my thoughts for a moment. But I managed to regain my composure and asked him what exactly went wrong. For some reason, he started boasting about it.
You remember, Mom, how you were there when we did the initial meet and greet, right?
Yeah, I remember.
Well, because you weren't at the ceremony, his wife was all, "Why?"
I see, I understand.
Big Brother was making all sorts of excuses, but his wife suddenly suggested to cancel the ceremony, and her parents went into a frenzy. The ceremony somehow started since everyone was already gathered, but throughout it was a sullen bride and a timid groom. It was quite peculiar atmosphere at the venue.
Is that what happened?
After the ceremony ended and all the attendees had left, I showed the video message from you, Mom, entrusted to me to my big brother, and then he started crying.
What? He cried?
Yeah, but seeing that, his wife got even more upset. She said something along the lines of, "How could you not invite someone who raised you with so much care to the most important event of your life?"
So, what happened after that? When I asked, he looked at me uncomfortably and said in a low voice, "They're separated." I was speechless, taken aback by this shocking news. Despite holding back my desire to attend the wedding for the sake of my son, the newlyweds separated shortly after their marriage. In retrospect, I think his wife admired the fact that I raised him as my own, despite having no blood relation. Furthermore, I recall that in the course of our conversation she had said, "I was also raised with great care by my parents, and I would love to build a warm and loving family with your son, just like my parents did." In other words, my son's stubbornness shattered his own happiness. When I heard this, I could hardly think of it as karma. Because he cried after watching my video message. If he still has feelings for me, I couldn't be happier. I immediately contacted my husband and asked him about the couple. With a worried voice, my husband asked for my opinion.
"I don't know what to do. Now that it has come to this, I don't know what to say to him."
Don't worry, he's good at expressing his feelings clearly to others, but he might need a little push.
A push, huh? Okay, I'll try it.
I don't know what happened after my husband and I talked on the phone, but when my younger son told me with a smile, they've reconciled. I believed everything would be okay from now on. I was resolved to truly leave them alone this time, and then...
Mom,
why are you here?
There's something I need to talk about.
With me?
Yeah, I'm sorry about what I said during the wedding prep. Watching that video message the other day reminded me. I've always thought of you as my mom, really. And you've always defended me saying I'm your son. I'm really sorry. I gently extended my hand to my son crying in front of me, wiping away the tears streaming down his cheeks. I was surprised to see an adult man shedding tears, but I thought that these tears must be expressing all of his feelings. He apologized for the harsh words he had thrown at me. That alone was enough for me. I didn't need anything more. Thanks for coming. I got the photos from Richard. You looked great. Your girlfriend, Linda, right? She's a kind and lovely girl. Take good care of her, okay? Make her the happiest bride in the world. Yeah, I absolutely promise. So, Mom? It might be asking a lot, but could you come back home? What? Dad has been down ever since you left. It's like when I lost my birth mother. I can't bear to see it. Your father? I'm really begging you. Hearing my eldest son's words, I decided to go back home. I couldn't believe that he, who told me he loved me, was feeling down like this. Was this a lie told by my eldest son to make me reconcile with his father? I headed home, half doubting, half hoping. When I slowly opened the door and stepped in after a long time, I heard a soft sobbing sound. Jennifer. I gently peeked in, and there was my husband, phone in hand, shoulders trembling as he cried. I was taken aback for a moment, but it would be strange not to say anything, so I called out to him, Robert. His body jolted. He quickly turned towards me. His cheeks were wet with tears reflecting the sunlight, and he quickly wiped his face and tried to act as if nothing was wrong, saying, What? Is something wrong? I couldn't help but laugh. You know. If I said I wanted to come back here, would you be angry? Huh? His surprised voice was cut off as everything suddenly went dark. It took me a moment to realize that I was enveloped in a warm embrace. As I returned the hug and asked, Does this mean it's okay? He repeatedly nodded, saying, Yeah, in a nasal voice. Since then, I reconciled with my husband, and that was the last time I saw him cry. Now, I go on trips with him, have dates, and sometimes go out with my eldest son and his wife, spending my time happily. I owe all this happiness to my daughter-in-law, Linda. I'm truly